Yes, it is the Tuesday ticket. The bus revs back up for a second time today. It is going to be a busy few weeks, I think, on this bus. And for all our supporters, there is emotions all over the place. People in breakup trauma right now. I can sense it, and who better to discuss all the weekends. Good stuff, all that good stuff for the weekend, and all the negativity that the beginning of the week has brought us as well. We'll get Jonathan's take very soon. I know that's why everyone joins. But it's the Tuesday ticket. It's always higher numbers at the beginning. I think everyone's now coming in for the opening gambit from yourself. Before we do that, we'll do all that good stuff. And a big hello to everyone as well, of course. Not a hello. But yeah, all that good stuff. Do hit the like button if you can now. Hit the wee thumbs up, and it will get us more of that algorithm in the old YouTube, you know. Give us a wee share if you want. As always, you can slag my hair too. If you want to become a Bhoycie Bus member, it is $1.99 a month. It's totally optional. Keeps the wheels on the road. And if you do want to become a Bhoycie Bus member, then you'll be joining elite company like D-Mac, like Phil McGinley, like Tad 77, the member dishing out himself, Alan Woods, Alistair Jack, legend, Stephen Murdoch, Alex Forsyth, and 420 somewhere, and so many of you as well. It's completely optional. Don't worry. There's no pressure to do it. Obviously, everything we do is free. Now, because obviously, you know, we don't have any sources or anything like that, Jonathan, so it's not really worth paying for our content, you know. And we are going to talk about that tonight. Trust me on that, because that is really beginning to boil my pish, for want of a better term. Right, okay. Speaking of what your Bobby can do, let's get on to our sponsor, ED Pharmacy. Yes, there is a QR code there. I'll just quickly remove that comment. Give it a wee scan if you so wish. It will take you to edpharmacy.co.uk for all your erectile dysfunctional needs. Or you might just fancy a longer party than normal. It's entirely up to you. Remember, with ED Pharmacy, if you're around Central Scotland, they offer free same-day delivery service 7 days a week. And for the rest of the UK, they aim for next-day delivery. Order cut-off is 6 p.m. Remember, and use the code BUS10 at the checkout for 10% off. There's no hidden fees. The prices you see are the prices you pay. And I'm pretty sure when it gets delivered, it's pretty discreet as well. So get stuck in to a wee bit of ED Pharmacy, right? Okay. Pie Sports, 12.5% off at the checkout with them. Be a Steve O'Mac and order $50 kebab.
You'll still be working its way through them for the next few months.
Oh,
it's the next manager after Ange Postecoglou, and he'll still be munching those pies.
Mental. 12.5% off at the checkout using the code BUS1888. Sponsors done. Like, sharing done. Become a member done. Let's get stuck in. Jonathan, what a weekend it's been.
Yes, Russell, it has been quite the weekend, hasn't it? It's the weekend that we were all really enjoying when the treble was secured, but I think there was an element of dread amongst the support come full time. There was an ominous feeling that Ange Postecoglou might have just managed his last Celtic match, as indeed it turned out to be the case. The mantra under Ange Postecoglou for the past couple of years has been, we never stop. Well, Ange has now stopped being the Celtic manager. When you're talking about Ange Postecoglou's time at Celtic, he, had a couple of false starts to that never stop mantra, didn't win in his first 3 attempts away from home. He did eventually find his feet, accelerated onto the gas for the past couple of years, hit a few speed bumps towards the end after securing another league championship. But now Celtic find themselves in a very familiar position. They are once again in the crossroads of a future decision that could have massive permutations on the future of the football club. Do they go down a familiar road and welcome back a familiar name to Parkhead and Brendan Rodgers? Or do they chance their arm on unfamiliar territory and go to a completely different route with one of the other names that are being linked with the job? One thing is for sure, Russell, slogans have been the way of it over the past couple of years. Celtic used one for their season ticket renewals, saying they were all in. Well, the proof is about to be in the pudding, because quite frankly, the football season is now over. However, Celtic's position, trying to reassert their position at the top of Scottish football this summer, has just begun.
Oh, Jonathan, it has just begun. It's going to be one hell of a summer. We'll kick it off with, I think I want your take on the weekend. Me and you went out Sunday briefly, and we were speaking then like Ange was gone. We were pretty confident it was done then, and we spoke about, the fact that the treble weekend win, it's all about how you want to view it now. I feel there's a lot of the supporters that it's their gift, right? Their gift to be emotionally all over the place with this club, because that's what it does to me when I watch them playing. You can turn into a psychopath, right? You can turn into the happiest guy in the world. It can, if it's Henrik Larsson leaving, it can turn you into tears. But one of the things that frustrates me a wee bit is I think it's unfair sometimes the pile-on individuals can find themselves getting, in Ange's case his, and the revisiting of narratives and stories and then twisting words that have been used before. It almost feels a wee bit like when your bud becomes your ex-bud, right? And you just don't know how to take it. But that's when I was 17, it was like that. Now, I'm as immature as anyone, mate, right? I am as immature as anyone. And I'm not that bad with breakups, mate, is what I'm seeing right now. And I just feel sometimes we need to just look at it with real clarity on what's happened. We have turned it around for 2 years ago being in a situation everyone wanted everyone out, essentially. If you had the Celtic tie on, mate, coaching staff, gone. Manager, gone. Whole board, gone. Everyone, we named it Celtic part, even the cleaner. Fuck it, she can go and all. That's what it was like, and that's what it became. So to think we've went from there to now just celebrating a treble, I think we need to understand that that's going to bring attentive eyes from elsewhere. I think we should also be comforting ourselves with the fact that, do you know what? It wasn't Leicester City that he left for. And I've defended Brendan for the other side of that argument. But when it's someone like Tottenham Hotspur, I'm like, I know they don't win trophies and they're a kid-on big club, if you like, but they're in the top bracket of that English Premier League in terms of resource, stadium, players. I know they've had a crap season this year, but in general, you class them as one of the top 6 in England. See if Celtic can continue having a wee conveyor belt of managers that get plucked up by top 6 sides in England. We'll have a lot more successful couple of years of these managers. We'll make a hell of a lot in compo of them, and we'll all live happily ever after. I want to just kind of look at the work that we've done in the 2 years, or Ange's done in particular, and the players have done. Give them their kudos for what was a treble, 5th trophy in 6. And then look at how we've ended up in a situation without a manager and try and take the personal stuff out of it. Anyone who's got an issue with badge pumping and stuff, how else is he going to get us on side? What's the template we're now setting for the next manager, Jonathan, to come in? Don't say you know who Celtic are. Don't say you even like us. Don't say you're going to be here for longer than a few games. What are they meant to? You've got to have a buy-in as well. I feel that he's actually done a professional job up to the end. He was cagey because he will have known there was talks going on. I don't think he'd signed anything, but he would have known there was stuff in the horizon, and he did not want to become a liar. But he also didn't want the focus to be about him. And to achieve the treble, he was spot on. So I think from my point of view, I can look at it now, and I probably kind of have been. I've kind of, again, I don't want to sound like a smart ass either, but like I've kind of been tried to be balanced. I think everyone on the bus and on the whole has kind of went, look, if he goes, well, not because we want him to, but we need to be realistic. There is a good chance he'll go. And I just think now that it's done, it's okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think we've all had an inclination it could have been happening. Really, some as far back as the week before at the Aberdeen game when he didn't fully.
You're getting called Lawrence Shankland.
Well, it's not quite as good as the Vinegar or Hess links I've had previously. To be fair, that's a bit of a downgrade. To be honest, a yellow card for John McCauley. But looking back at it, I think it was definitely there were signs there. I think for the last couple of weeks that this has been potentially going to happen. I think most people were waiting until the cup final to get a proper look at it. I think I think he does have feelings for the club. I think he has tried to treat the club with as much respect as he possibly can throughout this process. I think even when you're talking about the fist pumping and everything else, I still think he's a passionate manager. And I think he had bought into that sort of narrative. I think Mickey Beale helped towards that sort of passion coming out in Ange over the past few months. I don't think any of that was fake necessarily. I think there's a very good chance he could have ended up staying on for another season if it hadn't been for the fact Spurs had came in for him. There's rumours, he'd knocked back Brighton previously, that Brighton were considering him anyway. But the realistic thing is we're now in modern day football. Modern day football dictates that you're very unlikely to have a successful manager at Celtic for longer than 2 or 3 years, is what we're beginning to find out over the past few managers that we've had that have had a lot of success at the football club. So I don't think it's not pleasant going through this, but I think it is something we're going to have to accept is now a massive thing that is going to happen going forward. And whoever the next manager is, make no mistake about it, whether they go back for Brendan Rodgers again and people will turn around and say, oh, well, you can't trust Brendan because he walked out on us last time. There's absolutely no guarantee, no matter who you choose to bring in, whether it's Brendan or somebody else, that if they have similar levels of success to what Ange has had over the past couple of years, you won't necessarily lose them to another English Premiership side, even midway through a season. At least with Postecoglou, it's happened at the end of a season. And I think he has tried to put the club first as best he possibly can throughout this whole process.
Whilst Jonathan being acutely aware of his rolling contract, again, something we discussed on the bus a year ago. We got to the stage, I remember me and Johnny Logan particularly were saying, you tie down your asset, you secure your asset. And I remember the conversation, we were like, John thinks Celtic haven't offered him one though. I've got a feeling, and again, we're talking about sources, right? I remember saying, from a personal point of view, because it's common sense, that maybe Celtic have offered him a deal and he's turned it down. I know there's stories now, it was 3, 4, 5 deals that they offered him and they were getting better each time, whatever, mate. You have to take it one step too far. Like, he got offered a new contract and he turned it down because he was acutely aware the rolling deal now worked in his favour. That's what happened. That's just him. Yes, he was still in situ at the club and doing his best for the club, but it's not his gift to start then putting his career under restrictions that he doesn't need to. And if that means signing a new deal that he doesn't have to sign while still doing an excellent job at Celtic, so be it. And I think that was something that was patently obvious. Now, though, of course, what annoys me, and I'm more than happy to have the conversation, is the Celtic fans that are really upset. Whilst I may have used the line, if you've been up the garden path, Ange didn't take you up the garden path, you went up the garden path yourself, right? And I've said that. However, there's another aspect to it as well. Now, when you watch a Celtic podcast of any kind, or Celtic blog, you read a blog all the time, you become invested in the person a wee bit, do you know what I mean, who's telling these stories. And once you start hearing about sources here and sources, or you're getting told things that are matter of fact, like, oh, I've got, I've spoke to someone within the club and I can tell you this, I can tell you that. It's those fans that have watched that will feel so confused because they've watched these channels or read these blogs for year upon year, and sometimes I just feel with the sources stuff, I'm like, they're talking shite. Just give an honest opinion what you think the situation is and use common sense. It made complete sense this time last summer to offer Ange a new deal. We speculated, we didn't need to go. He was offered a new deal, by the way. We just thought, of course, he's been offered a new deal, right? And it looks like he's turned it down because he now likes the rolling contract. Instead, all this pish comes out now. And I was reading one of the blogs, one of those blogs, man, one of those blogs. Mm. I was reading it today, and it's like, he turned this down, then he was offered another 5 different improved terms each time, yada yada. And it's like, well, why didn't you say that at the time then if you knew all this? Oh, shut up. I just feel like nobody's got the bollocks when we're winning to look at things from a balanced prism. And then when you get into situations like this, fans feel let down because all last week was all this, he will look at Spurs, then he will stay. And it's said so matter-of-factly by people that have alluded in the past that they've got sources. So even if they're not saying this is from a source, they then start thinking everything they say must have sort of source intel behind it. And I just think that's leading fans up a garden path they don't need to as well. For me, it should just all be about everyone's got different views. And if you can continue during a season, look at it from, there is a negative to that rolling contract, by the way, then you're never as let down come the summer when inevitably that rolling contract has benefited the manager. But rather than acting after the event like a smart ass saying, oh, well, he was offering new deals, he never took them, the rolling contract, it turns out, suited him. So, well, fucking anyone could have told you that. You don't need sources to tell you that. And last week it was all, from a lot of them, like, he is staying. He is. And it's like, you're saying that knowing people think someone's told you that because of all the other pish that you say. And I think it's those fans that read that and swallow that, and rightfully so, because like I say, they're invested in the people that they've either watched, read for year upon year, and that ends up being a total letdown for them. Just need to bring some balance to the conversation. You never end up too surprised come the end of it, and you never end up too upset. I say all that now. I mean, when Rodgers left, I was probably where a lot of people are now, but I'm very much once bitten, twice as shy.
Yeah, well, I think Brendan Rodgers should have been the warning sign for most that went through that, because I was very much the same as you. I totally bought into the whole waving the 10 fingers at the crowd and making it look as if he was going to be here for the long run, all the heartfelt stories and everything else. I think Rodgers had a lot of people right around his little pinky. But I think once that happened, I don't think Postecoglou has ever really tried anything like that. I know some people are trying to make comparisons to some of the things he said over the past week or so, referencing Tommy Burns, etc., and things like that, as if he's, saying one thing and then doing something else, is what I've read a wee bit about today, amongst other things. But I think when you're looking at the contract situation, from Celtic's point of view, it suited Celtic at the time to offer him the rolling contract because he was not the first choice for the Celtic job. He was far from it by the sounds of it. It was a bit of a punt, and he fell into Celtic's lap from what I believe anyway, based on the City Group connections. And Celtic probably felt this could backfire. So from the club's point of view, they were probably thinking it made sense to offer the 1-year rolling contract. So they can't have it both ways when it ends up working the other way and Postecoglou turns out to be a roaring success, to then, expect him to necessarily sign up on a long-term deal. Bear in mind, he's got no affiliation with the football club before he came in the doors either. So I think when you're looking at the contract aspect, then Celtic might have to reassess how they do business going forward on that. It'll be an interesting one,
Try and get a number one target. Just try and get your number one target in future. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I mean, I wonder if they'd have done the same if it'd been Eddie Howe. It would have been.
Of course, he wasn't going to go for the rolling deal. Of course, he wasn't. No way.
That's exactly it. But Celtic have historically done these rolling contracts more often than not. It's what they've always kind of went back to. Even Brendan started on a rolling contract and then he signed the deal after his first season, I think it was.
Would that be because Brendan, though, needed the convincing from Celtic? Whereas I think Celtic felt as much as it just proves this wasn't a masterstroke getting Ange in. They landed lucky, mate. They landed, it was like, who's pitched his name? What? Right, okay, we'll go for it. They got him and were like, we'll hedge our bets and just give him a 1-year rolling deal. They weren't as sure as anyone. Do you know what I mean? That's the reality. No. And it's given bit them on the fucking arse.
I think from a business point of view, I can understand why they did that to begin with, because they were so far down the pecking order and they probably felt, at that time, the fans were right on their cases. There was going to be quite a lot of people that were going to be getting in the neck if the experiment with Postecoglou hadn't worked out. And I think you're right, they were trying to hedge their bets, but they probably, at the time, I think most people would have probably been quite surprised if they had turned around and said, here's Ange on a 3-4 year deal. I think the Celtic fans, even at that point, would have had their eyebrows even more raised than they actually were as well at the time. So, I get why they did it on that one, but I think, going forward, if you're getting your target in and you're getting one of your first choice targets, which hopefully they will do on this occasion, then they are going to have to start looking at these longer term contracts. I always think, though, Russell, with the Celtic board, they tend to want to think more along the lines of, well, if this doesn't work out, we're going to have to pay this guy off his contract, and that's going to cost us money, rather than this guy's going to be a roaring success and make us money.
That's a good point.
It's how they tend to approach everything, and it's how we see them approach Champions League football. So it's nothing new, and it would not surprise me. I know you're talking about these rolling contracts shouldn't really be a thing, and I'm mentioning it now as well. I would not be surprised whatsoever, whoever the next manager turns out to be, if Celtic go down the same route of offering a rolling contract. I think the only exception to that rule would perhaps be Brendan if they bring him back. I think anybody else, they might revert to type and just continue on the 1 year rolling deal, particularly if it turns out to be somebody that's relatively unproven or unknown in the UK. I would bet my house pretty much the Celtic will do a rolling contract deal again.
But what would it tell you? I mean, I just wonder if when it comes out, you've not got the courage or convictions to go long term. Because I watched some of the English media talking about the Ange deal, and initially it had been reported it was only a 2 year deal, maybe an option, and then they were sort of saying, well, look, that's not really backing a manager, because that'll have fans on tenterhooks. If he kicks off doing well in 6 months' time, that'll be like, he's only got 18 months left, wouldn't you do something with this? Now, it doesn't create a certainty. Now, the other reality is, I mean, what we're saying this about rolling contracts, I looked up a wee stat earlier today. As of April 2023, the average tenure of an EPL manager is 1 year, 243 days, I think it was. That's only just over a month ago. 1 year, 243 days is the average tenure. So we had Ange for 2 years, 2 successful ones, 2 group stage footballs, and we got maybe 5 million quid out of it. I just wonder if the sometimes the conservative approach that you're saying, I don't mean a Tory approach.
The Tory board.
It's the last rabbit hole to go down. But I wonder if the reserved doomsday approach is maybe down to the fact they're not getting enough. You were talking about transfers. You were talking about the Champions League. We've seen this before. It's nothing new. When you look at players, how often do we get a number one target as a player? How often are we actually getting the number one target as the manager? And you've got to wonder that also, and what the reasons are. Now, if we're being really cynical, you could say in any relationship you look at, you could look at me, for example, and go, well, you've had 5 steady relationships, Bhoycie. They were all really nice. They were all far better looking than you. And you split up with them all. Who's the common denominator? And you'd be right. You would be right to then go, even though I think you seem all right, Bhoycie, that maybe it's you who's the prick. So I think it's only fair that we can also assume that the board might not be the greatest team of people for our managers to work with. And maybe they don't sell the best version that football guys think Celtic could get to. And football people, like an Ange Postecoglou, who would dare to dream with a Celtic side in the Champions League, maybe competing, maybe trying to get out of a group, but maybe with a wee bit more investment, or like Rodgers did going into that third year. And even, by the way, Neil Lennon left after his first spell because he'd felt the investment had completely dwindled. And it's like maybe there's a common denominator with them as well, that this is maybe some that, with the shake-up obviously being musical chairs effectively, if we're being honest, it was musical chairs. There's now 2 Lowells for the price of 1, even though you wanted them all out a couple of years ago. Now everyone doesn't want to blame the board on anything now, which just shows you what a few trophies can do. And I just wonder if the statement today tells you things are the same as they ever were. I put it in the group chat earlier. There was the statement by Celtic. And of course, we took pelters at the time because I did certainly on Twitter at the time. I said, look, Peter Lawwell's called a non-executive chairman, but he's the only guy with a chairman in his title. Now, I have run a tiny business in my life, Jonathan, nothing like a Celtic, so I'm not trying to compare. But if the tiny wee bit of business savvy I've got would mean when you're given a title and you're the only person with the word chairman in it, you're the chairman, right? And of course, in the statement today, Peter Lawwell, Celtic chairman. That non-exec thing had been took out the equation. Doesn't really surprise you. When was it he was appointed non-exec? In January it was, January. And we were told we were being hysterical and all that. But we did an emergency bus trip that day just to get everyone's sort of feedback on it. Of course, people thought it was making a mountain out of a molehill. Now, for the balance of the argument, because I think we've had enough time now and enough shows to be talking about where Ange was at during this, and if people want to go back into that, that's fine. But I'm just looking at the two sides of the coin, and the other side of the coin is the people who employed Ange up until this morning, or last night, whenever it was that he's left. And what responsibility do they take? And are we seeing what was a master play by Celtic in the sense that when there was a revolt, they just got Lawwell off the stage for a bit. They changed everyone's titles. They brought in Lawwell's son, 2 Lawwells for the price of 1, and then reinstated Lawwell with the softly approach of non-exec chairman. Now he is called chairman by Celtic on their site today. And if you don't think a statement when it comes down to a manager departing that's been as successful as him is not every word looked at, and it's just not a careless error, Jonathan. He's the Celtic chairman. Now, if you told us 2 years ago that was going to happen, folk would have went mental at that. But now with a few trophies in the bank, everyone just seems to be a wee bit sort of more laid back. And I'm not sure that's also true. The way I see it is there's two sides to the argument. I think good managers at times over the last 2 decades get to a point or a glass ceiling with this board. They realise they can't push any further, or they can tell they're not as invested in this anymore, and it makes leaving a wee bit easier. Do I think, notwithstanding that, Ange would go to Spurs? Yes, I do, but we've discussed that numerous times. I'm just trying to take the conversation to the other part of the operating machine that is Celtic.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at it, really, if Postecoglou didn't, and he'll know the board well enough to have got a good feeling as to what they wanted to do in Europe by now, even if he's not had any rifts or anything like that with them, which I don't think he has, by the way. I think he's probably left on pretty good terms from what you're seeing coming out. But I mean, if you're looking at it and he's getting the vibe that the board aren't really that interested in Europe and are only really looking at domestic success, well, Ange Postecoglou is going to look at it and think, well, wait now. I came in my first season, turned round a massive league points deficit against Rangers to win the league whilst they were making a European final, plus I had the League Cup in to boot and was very close to the treble even in my first season whilst I was rebuilding a whole new squad. Second season, he then goes on to get the clean sweep in Scotland. Really, when it comes to Scottish football, Ange Postecoglou has completed it, mate. So there's not very much left for him to do on a domestic scale other than try and set new records, because anything that he went into next season on a domestic standpoint, he could only look to match. He couldn't look to better really very much, apart from records. In terms of silverware, he was always going to be more in a position where he was more likely to lose something rather than really gain something in domestic footballing terms. The only way his stock was going to rise next season was if Celtic were willing to give him the backing to take the club to the next level in European football, so that both him and the players could put themselves onto that platform and keep himself interested. So I totally get why he took the Spurs job, because if he went into it next season, and these trebles are becoming something that we win so often, people that are beginning to probably, not necessarily consciously, but certainly subconsciously, there is probably an element of it getting taken for granted slightly, just because of the volume of how many we've won. Celtic have been a victim of their own success of late, I think, on that part. But if he was to go in, say, next season, he lost both the cups, but he still won the league, his stock's still going to have fallen. They would almost be turning around, and that's quite crazy to think. But even if he only won the league, I think, and maybe he got to like the Europa League last 16 or whatever, finished third in his group, I still think Celtic fans would look at that and think that's not as good a season as the year before, because we're so conditioned now to winning the treble. And I think he's probably looked at it from his point of view and thought, well, this board aren't interested perhaps in Europe. We'll find out soon enough how interested they are this summer. I need to get myself out of here if Spurs are really willing to offer me this job, because domestically there's not much more I can really do with this club other than do something I've already done this season. And I think that does play a part of it. And I would imagine when he's had those conversations with the board, I'm not entirely sure Ange Postecoglou would be convinced they shared his vision for what Celtic wanted to do in Europe. And that's been proven countless times over the last 10, 15, 20 years that Celtic haven't really stepped up as much as they should have on that stage both off the pitch and indeed on it.
Yeah, it's interesting. JG's in the chat. He's raging right now. He's disagreeing. That's fine, because I'm happy to bring up comments that disagree, JG. So I hope you're good, mate, and cheers for jumping on the bus, as always. And he's saying, aye, they just gave us total effing domination at the death of Rangers. What the fuck are up with yous? Now, again, this is what we're trying to say, JG. I don't think the best managers, pal, come in to Celtic just wanting to have the death of Rangers or dominate Rangers. I think they come in with bigger fish to fry because they can see a different potential in Celtic that'll not involve worrying about what being better than Rangers. That'll come naturally if their ambitions in Europe are taken into account. I think that's the point we're trying to make. No one's saying the board have got everything wrong or anything like that. We're having a debate right now about whether, and you might disagree, which is absolutely fine, but I'm going to try and emphasise the point that eventually managers, I think, and it's just my view, get to a certain level with the board, and then for whatever reason, the shared view becomes a split one. And the board either stop in their tracks a wee bit or start driving the bus, if you want, a wee bit slower. And the manager who's wanting to kick on doesn't feel Celtic as a club are going to kick on. And suddenly the viewpoints are different, and then we need to move on again. Is that the case in Ange's situation? I'm not so sure, because I think a top six or traditional top six EPL club is new waters for us. But notwithstanding that, he didn't want to sign a new deal last summer, apparently. And there might be reasons for that as well. When we look at the last two windows, Alistair Johnston aside, O's done pretty well. Is he an upgrade though in Giakoumakis? No. And last summer's window, don't even get me started. That wasn't a proper backing either. But if all the focus is on the death of Rangers still, then yeah, we'll be able to get managers 100% JG that can come in and hopefully carry on that dominance. I think the managers that have really kind of piqued our interest a wee bit in recent times have probably got eyes a wee bit beyond just the Rangers stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think when it comes to European football, Celtic have just been out of it for so long. I think that is where the managers are going to want to test themselves against the best opposition. And, obviously finishing ahead of Rangers is brilliant, and it's been great being able to do it again this season and in the last couple of seasons. But the problem Celtic have is that domestically, our league just isn't that strong. Once you take Rangers and Celtic out of it, the rest of the competition isn't something that, other clubs are going to be paying much attention to. Celtic are expected to be beating the rest of the Scottish division. And then, fair enough, in the Rangers games are obviously going to be a lot closer. But when it comes to Europe, that is a proper opportunity to really test yourselves against some of the best teams in the world, particularly when you're playing in the Champions League, like Celtic will be next season. I think the board need to be able to show that they are willing to try and go that extra mile to try and get Celtic playing and competing at that level rather than just making up the numbers, which is what it's felt like the last few times we've been in Europe's premier competition. And, managers aren't going to be shy in applying for the Celtic job this time around, Russell. I would turn around and say to you, this is probably the most appealing the Celtic job has been in a long, long time.
Agreed.
I would possibly say even in my lifetime, this is probably the most appealing that the job has been, because they're taking on a team that have won everything domestically, are already guaranteed to be in the Champions League group stages, so you don't have to worry about early qualifiers whilst you're settling in as a manager to your new squad and trying to get a feel for your players. And then on top of that, when you're playing in the Champions League, you've got that opportunity to elevate your managerial status even more by testing your wits against some of the best teams in the world football. So from me, it seems like it should be one of those moments that if the board and the club get this right, they should be able to market this job in a way that will attract high-quality candidates, whether it be one of the names mentioned or whether they find somebody else that will want to come in and be able to do a job. And it's about Celtic selling that vision. But part of that vision has to be trying to make a dent in European competition. You don't sell Celtic purely on just being better than Rangers, because unless you're already heavily invested in Celtic as a manager and you've got affiliations with the club previously, it's probably not going to interest you overly much as a selling point, unless you are like another Ange Postecoglou who's getting it as a big step up from the job they're currently doing. However, I think on this occasion, Russell, I would be surprised if Celtic are looking to go down the sort of project route as much. I think they will try their best and hopefully succeed in getting a name in that is actually already proven and established, so they get the fans buy-in straight away on this one. And because of the fact they do have those selling points, which I've just mentioned, I would like to think Celtic will be able to push the boat out, and Dermot Desmond being in the building might just help them do that.
Well, this is true as well. This is a different space Celtic find themselves in terms of how they attract a manager. I think that's undeniable. I also think from the highs, when you get a low like this, it's on them to then get us back up. And whilst you can see, obviously, the turnaround and the attitude towards Ange, and it only took him. I thought he was pretty savvy. I think who was it that described it? It might have even been on the bus this afternoon. Someone described him as, he played the everyday man card. And I thought that was a brilliant way of putting it. He just played the everyday man card. And yeah, he said something about Dalglish when he joined. Yeah, he pumped the badge a few times and that. I mean, he's got to do that, isn't he? I've never known a manager at any club that doesn't do a bit of that. We need to keep the fans on side as well. And when you talk about project managers, for me, the project's in full flow. It's now the next step. This isn't a whole rebuild that's needed. This isn't we'll need to sell him to afford to even do that here. We're sitting in the group stage of the Champions League next season for the second year in a row. We're sitting with accounts that's shown nearly, £50 million cash reserves. There is an overdraft facility as well, not that we ever want to use that, but it's there.
Yeah.
The rainy day of COVID has been. We came out of that, we survived that test. We have assets on the park. I think it's quite important that, you keep the fans, and by the way, 4 kits this year, season ticket sellouts all over again. You've used a tagline of "We're all in." I think now, let's see who's all in. Let's find out if we're all in here or not. And being all in would mean a manager that captures the imagination. That's what we want to see. Now, of course, I have been absolutely dining on humble pie for the last 2 years when it came to Postecoglou. He was as underwhelming an appointment as I thought it could have been. And I share the views that a lot of Spurs fans have now. I shared them 2 years ago. I totally get why that. And is that an exception to the rule? Maybe. I think as well, when the club's had the financial support of the fans to the extent it has, it's got rewards from the Postecoglou era of the two campaigns in Europe. We all know, because you need to publish your accounts, how flush you are. I think that you can't be treated like a dafty, like any further forward. I think it needs to be something that gets us on side. And one thing I always say about football as well, it's not always like we need to look at this like we're the accountants, like from a business head. Sometimes I think your emotional investment that we all talk about right now, then warrants a wee bit of magic and romance, from the club, and that fairy tale to carry on, and that means moments in time. Now, the Brendan Rodgers thing, it doesn't necessarily need to be him, but when you look back at how to capture and galvanise a fan base after the low of going out in the Scottish Cup semi to Sevco, Rangers, whatever you want to call it, when that happened, right, we were on a low. And then before you know it, was 13,000 or 11,000, whatever it may have been, inside Celtic Park, mate, just for the announcement of a manager. Yep. So forget the fact it's Brendan Rodgers. What I just mean is, why aren't we entitled as supporters to have moments like that throughout our supporting history? Why do we always need to get the sensible cap on, man? No. We've done all that. The club's in an extremely sensible position in terms of a Scottish team, which keep getting told about the barriers that produces, and yet I look at Celtic and I go, well, we're doing a good job of smashing them. When you look at estimated turnover, Rab McNair saying of £112 million for this year. I think that we deserve a wee bit of imagination here, a wee bit of creativity, and a wee bit of a push.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the onus is on the board now to go out and actually find the right man for the job. And obviously, reading their statement today, they're saying they're well underway with that. Whether that's just playing to the gallery slightly or not will remain to be seen, just how quickly we react to losing Postecoglou. But I think they'll hopefully have learned lessons from the last time, because the last time we were trying to appoint a manager, it was an absolute car wreck. And as I agree with you, I think they stumbled onto Postecoglou rather than it being some inspired appointment. I don't think Celtic need another situation or saga like they had 2 years ago, where they're chasing down a manager like Eddie Howe was being chased down a couple of years back, and then it drags on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and we almost get towards the start of the season only for our main man to pull out. So I think Celtic will they'll certainly have a short list, and I think the short list that we're seeing on the bookies website certainly has some appealing names in there. And I think with Celtic having as much money as they do in the bank, having the guaranteed Champions League football, they're in a very unique position to sell the club this time. They might not have as good an opportunity to sell the club in terms of what's going on for them right now than they ever will have going forward for quite some time, because they've already got a squad that's won everything in Scotland, proven they're winners. There's plenty of quality players in that team. And you look at Europe and you think there's got to be an opportunity there for Celtic to improve. They're sleeping. They're like a sleeping giant in some ways in Europe, because they just haven't done anything in so long. But it's all there for us to really do it if somebody can put it together. It's something you can possibly get behind, a vision. A lot of managers could get behind when you look at the size of our stadium, what the fans bring to big European nights, how the players even performed last season in the Champions League. I think, there is all of that as massive potential, and it will be massively appealing to a lot of top managers. And for me, as far as Celtic, go about advertising the role properly, and I'll be interested, because I'm hopeful Dermot Desmond will be involved in this, because he generally is quite good when he's hands on. Dermot tends to come up trumps for Celtic, and the fact he's obviously came in, and I think the fact those pictures with Ange Postecoglou a few weeks ago, I think we now know what those pictures are about. That was Desmond trying one last throw of the dice, I think, to get him to stay. And I think if Desmond is now in situ, I think he's going to have a massive say on who the next manager is. And that can only be a good thing for Celtic as well. And I would trust them a little bit more this time to get the decision correct. Maybe my trust is blinded slightly. Maybe I'm just blinded by my love of the club and the fact that things have been a bit better the last couple of years. But I'd like to think the board have learned from their mistakes, and with the position the club is in now, that we are able to go out, identify our top target, whoever that may be, and go and actually get them this time, and make sure we do it in a swift manner so that we can properly prepare for next season.
Yeah, El Camino completely echoing what you were saying. I think he posted that literally at the same time as you started saying it. Dermot Desmond could well be pissed off at what's happened, and will be all in on the next manager. El Camino's hoping a big surprise is on the card. I mean, one good thing is, if you wind up Dermot, he kind of stays about for at least a couple of weeks and tends to make big decisions happen. And I wonder if, interestingly as well, when we see, there was just another comment that came in from Mr. Wee Red, and he's saying Enzo being the City Group candidate may make him favourite with the board, although he wasn't a success in his Todd previously. And just if we indulge what you're saying about Desmond being annoyed, you just wonder if that bold idea could be kiboshed by Desmond himself, just going, nah, no, I don't want Enzo Maresca. Put him away. Who else was on that list that actually is compelling? You know what I mean? And has the stature, has the CV. And I think that could actually work in our favour, that one. I think with Maresca, we need to remember, if he were to get the job, all the Parma stuff, I know it was only 13 games, but we're going to have just this. There's no trophies you can look back at that he's running his own. He's just been an assistant. Mm-hmm. It'll be the loosest ever sort of. But look how well Arteta did finishing second with Arsenal. That'll be as close as we get to somehow because he used to be Pep's assistant. I mean, that's not trophies. That's not even. It's just a loose sort of connection you're trying to clutch at. And I think with Maresca, if he were to have a start that Ange did, I'm not sure you would see the same patience this time round. I think, it might be a wee bit different when you don't have any sort of credibility in the bank. And whilst Ange was quick to say, at the press the other week, he was, I was a joke figure when I joined, yada, yada. I think there was still a lot of people, because a lot of Celtic fans are, the vast majority, pretty intelligent. And I think a lot of people, from my memory anyway, did a lot of homework on his career and spun it in a really positive way. and looked at the trophies he'd won and started going, we're going to need to be patient here and look at the players he's got. He's not had his right guys in yet, yada, yada. But you're joining now, as we've just discussed, an oven-ready sort of Celtic, unless there's a real, departure lounge that's formed of our key players. And then I don't think we're in that same space. And I don't think someone like Enzo will get that sort of patience from us, mate. Like, I really don't think you would see say it was a similar record to his Parma one or whatever, or 6 games like Ange's, 3 wins, 3 defeats. So what was it? 7 games, three wins, 1 draw, 3 defeats. And I think if he got to that stage, I think the noises would be a hell of a lot louder of disgruntlement than what they were for Ange. And I think that would be a risk that's not needed to be taken.
Well, yeah, the drums would be going if he was into that sort of position. I think, when Postecoglou came in, Celtic were in such a different place. I think the fans knew it was going to take time for whoever came in, I think, by the way, to obviously put their own stamp on a squad that needed completely overhauled. You've got to remember, Ange pretty much ripped up the full starting 11 of that Celtic team that he inherited. And naturally, that was always going to take time. And I think Celtic fans had come to expect that we were the underdogs going into that season to win the league title. And it was more a case of getting ourselves back into contention. Naturally, obviously wanted to be winning it, but there was that element of realism there that this could be quite hard given how far ahead Rangers had finished to get ahead of us the year before. But if you flip it this time around, Celtic are on the back of winning a double in Ange's first season. They won a treble last season. They were close to setting all sorts of records domestically this season, and they probably would have if they hadn't tailed off after winning the league title. The Celtic fans are going to expect whoever comes in, that's the bar that's been set. Celtic, whoever they appoint, that guy's got to try and go again and try and get to that sort of level, or if not, try and surpass it domestically, which is a high bar to have set. And I think the expectation levels are going to be a lot higher. So I think if you get a manager in who doesn't have the CV of being a proven winner, and then they don't start off well, I think you're right to think that eyebrows would be raised, and Celtic fans might be chomping at the bit a little bit if something like that was to happen. I don't think it'll be Enzo that will end up taking the Celtic job. I just don't think he's got the qualifications there. I think at least with Ange Postecoglou, whilst he was an unknown, he had success in previous jobs. He knew how to win league championships, and I think that is always a bit more reassuring. If you're going to go for a left field appointment, you want somebody that at least knows how to handle in pressure situations, get his team over the line either as a player or indeed a manager. And I think Celtic will look for something similar in this appointment because they've already got a team of winners that have been proven winners over the last couple of years. They're going to want a manager that is a proven winner and a proven manager so that we can continue this success that we've been having and hopefully push on even more. So I'd be surprised if it was him, but I understand the connection through the City group. If you were asking me if I'd want him, no, I'd rather we went for somebody else that's proven themselves a bit more and has a bit more of a CV to back up.
And now we'll get to that stage then, because obviously, I think the most important thing is rather than dwelling on the ifs, buts, the maybes, the whys, the stories they all seem to know 12 months ago that are only getting released now. Rather than dwelling on the Ange stuff and whatever the narrative and whatever the story around all that was, it's all about what we do going forward. So I suppose the question is, would you be able to go again with another appointment like Ange that is from the left field, or are you now looking for a name that you actually recognise and you know?
Well, I think my favourite would have been Brendan. I know that's not going to be everyone's cup of tea to bring Brendan back because I know some people still don't like how he departed the building. My counter argument to that will be no matter who you bring in now, what Brendan did won't become something that's just happened as a one-off. That will become a more regular occurrence over the next 10 years. I'm convinced of it. If Celtic managers are successful, you'll see this happen more and more regularly. But Brendan's on with a proven track record, knows what he's doing in the league. I think it's the safe option if you're wanting a steady pair of hands in terms of winning trophies, because like it or not, Brendan Rodgers at Celtic equals trophies because he's never lost a trophy when he was Celtic manager. Will he be interested? I think is the interesting one because you are beginning to see fluctuations. As you know, I like having a look at the bookies and seeing what the odds are. Brendan's odds are now floating out a little bit. There does seem to be rumours going around that he's not interested in the job at this time. How much truth there is in that, I'm not entirely sure.
Jonathan, someone will clarify that tomorrow, I'm sure. Probably around lunchtime.
I mean, yeah, probably, but I'm not sure whether or not he'd want to come back and potentially deal with that. Having to go again, having done so much success the first time around domestically, it's a tall order for Brendan to come back in and beat what he done previously. An invincible treble. It's impossible to beat domestically, and the fact he won so many on the bounce, and obviously Europe, I think, would be the only thing that could potentially catch his eye because that is perhaps where he feels he could have done better with Celtic. But if it's not Brendan, I think it's Knutson now that's into the favourite with the bookies, the Bodo Glimt manager, who obviously did get the better of Postecoglou a couple of years ago, has had a few good results in Europe, albeit in the Conference League. Has done pretty well, though, proven himself to be a winner in the Norwegian League, won the last 2 Norwegian titles. However, it would be a left field appointment if we were to
Is
go
that right,
way.
though? Is that right? Because they were saying on the radio today he finished 18 points behind Mulder.
Oh,
or they
I
are
thought
18.
I'd read. I don't know what
Somebody
position is in the
clarify.
current table.
It could be
Yeah.
one way or the other. I don't. I didn't realise he'd been.
I was under the impression he'd won back-to-back titles with them. Perhaps it was the end of last
But their
season.
season will only be midway through it right now, won't it? Because they play March to November, I'm sure. But it was one of the pundits. I can't remember which one. But they were saying like he's 18. They said 18 points behind Mulder.
Yeah, well, that is surprising. That is surprising. Although Bodo Glimt, I think even winning that league was fairly surprising at the time because that wasn't supposed to really happen in Norway either. They seem to have came from nowhere. I'm not entirely sure how much truth there is in the rumours that he's going to be the next guy in, but certainly if you are following the money, which I tend to like to do, the money is going on Knutson at the moment. And
it's early days, though, right?
It is early days, and what you find, I think, particularly when you're looking at betting odds when it comes to managers, is usually whoever is the favourite at the start very rarely ends up being the one who ends up appointed because quite often they'll end up being a surgeon. It's when you start seeing one of the ones that's the outsider and you start seeing their price coming in, and then that's when you start getting a much better feel for it. At the moment, it's complete guesswork. I don't think Celtic are anywhere near close to making an appointment yet, so I don't think anyone can have any ITK knowledge as to who the man is going to be yet. But I would imagine over the next week or so we'll have a better idea. But this Alan confirming Boulder's actually 8 points clear.
Someone else said their last title though was 2021.
2021. I think he won 2 in a row though.
He won 2 in a row, and now he's 8 clear.
Now he's 8 clear. So, I mean, in terms of him, what you would find there, and whilst he maybe doesn't have the experience at a higher level than Norwegian football is still, a solid enough level for us. And, he's proven that he's had success there and he knows how it takes to get over the line winning league championships, which I think is always an important thing if you're looking at a Celtic manager. But I think if it was to be him, Russell, I don't know if that would be considered underwhelming by too many supporters using that dangerous word because he probably isn't that box office name. I don't know what your thoughts would be on somebody like him getting the job who's, granted had success in a different country, but, not somebody that we're overly familiar with.
Well, I just think right now we need to look at the situation as well, where I'm going to tie this in with Gary Brown's comment because he said, the talk on Ange leaving, but Kennedy could be jumping ship as well. Obviously, the stories are that John Kennedy has requested to Celtic that he gets the chance to go to Spurs with Ange. Strachan has been linked as well, young Gavin Strachan, him and his iPad, separate contract obviously for him that we need to get some compo for. But I think that's very important because what we actually want is whoever it next comes in. The one thing we can say about a left field appointment like Ange is one thing, right? That is one thing. However, a left field appointment to come in and have the staff Celtic decide for him to be in situ on his dugout beside him, I think that's doubling down on something that I really do feel is the exception to the rule working. So if there was to be a Knutson coming in, and his first name is interesting me, and some of the older folk will remember, there used to be a guy who played up front in the 90s for Dundee United who had the same first name, and he was called Shell. That's how it was pronounced then. But I'm hearing everyone call him like Kedel and stuff like that now. And I don't know if that's right or wrong. Maybe we just went with Shell in the 90s because it was easier. But there was a Swedish or Norwegian striker that played up front for Dundee United, and it was the exact same spelling of the first name, but he was just called Shell Olofsson. So I wonder if his first name's Shell. That's just me showing my Scandinavian know-how, Jonathan.
We'll get that question to the supporters groups if he gets the job. Make sure that gets asked at the conference.
Yeah, that's a great opening question. Yeah, do you prefer Shell or Kettle? Aye, we'll definitely ask that. But I wonder if it's to be a Knutson, you'd be more optimistic at him doing well. Not because he's got a bad CV or anything like that, but because he's maybe not the big glamorous name or whatever. But they've got a far better chance of this time they can come in and they can actually come with their own backroom team and we can just get all that stuff sorted. Not fanning about. And I think Eddie Howe fanning about with all that as well, by the way. I think there's two sides to that. Do you know what I mean? But I just feel that whoever it is that comes in, I think if we're going to go with a more, as I say, left field appointment, then we definitely cannot do it whilst then let them bring in, or them not having their own backroom team whatsoever. That's just not right. It's not fair. I think with the John Kennedy, Gavin Strachan stuff, not because I think they've done anything wrong in the last 2 years, but for me, it's when a manager goes, 9 times out of 10, that means the backroom staff go. And I think when Lenny came back and he was thrusted upon him you know what I mean, and it was put upon him the backroom team, I think that definitely didn't help him. Undeniably, I know there was many mistakes during that time, but I don't think not being able to bring in his own
or whoever he wanted,
whoever it may have been. Like, he was given autonomy to do that first time round when he was a rookie manager. But anyway, we don't digress too far. But then when Ange came in, he did it on his own, and you're like, I don't think that's normal. And maybe when I seen the news about Kennedy going, potential wanting to go to Spurs and Gavin Strachan being like, I thought, well, do you know what? I would like to think that they would have to go somewhere anyway, eventually, because whoever the new manager is, I want them to have the clout, the swagger to be able to go, when I come in, it's going to also be with my band. Do you know what I mean? Not a bunch of session musicians in the background. Do you know what I mean? It's not fair to be doing that and then judging them the same way you would judge them in other terms they've had at other clubs when they will have had their own people around them, like most clubs do. I think Celtic have got, they've got away with that with Ange. That definitely would. I think if we were to go left field again, yes, okay, because we've seen with Ange, you can be proved wrong, yada yada. But you cannot expect us to go left field again, bring them in on their own without and us give them the backroom team and it to work twice in a row. I think that's a stretch in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think Celtic should surely be giving whoever they're going to appoint the autonomy to bring in whoever staff they want to have. And, I think when it came to Postecoglou, I think Celtic had probably got themselves tied up in knots because of Eddie Howe stalling because of backroom team not all wanted to come up. I believe the rumour was at the time as to why that all fell through. And I don't know if that's perhaps played into Celtic's thinking when they went to Postecoglou and just thought, we're taking no chances here. You're going to have to take the job and just work with our backroom staff because we need somebody in pronto on that one. Lennon was obviously just going to get whatever was put on him because he couldn't believe he was getting offered the job again the second time around, much like most of us. So the Celtic board had complete control on that appointment, unfortunately, as to what Lennon was going to be working with when they decided to make him that job offer. I would like to think now that when we're in a position of strength, we need to continue to stay as strong as we possibly can. They're going to need to try and pull either a renowned name from somewhere if they possibly can, and if they can't, they need to produce the best name they possibly can from a different market that perhaps Celtic fans aren't as familiar with. But whoever you're going to bring in, they need to have, their own backroom staff around them, particularly if it did turn out to be something like a Knutson, just to make them feel a bit more settled, have their own people around them so they've got the right guys there to bounce ideas off of and who they know and trust, more importantly, because Ange Postecoglou, when you look at something like that, when he actually came in, it's even more incredible the job he'd done when he was working with people he'd never even spoken to before, and managed to get the best out of all of them and get them all on side so quickly and into his way of thinking. I think that doesn't come around very often. Most people would like to have that bit of comfort of having somebody that they know and trust with them in the dugout that they can turn to, particularly if the situation does get a little bit tough, like it might well do at the start when you're adjusting to the demands of the football club. You don't want to end up having to be turning around and feeling like you're all alone in the world, and you're stuck looking at Gavin Strachan, who's too busy fucking playing on his iPad. So yeah, I think if Celtic were looking when they're looking at this next manager, they have to be letting them bring in their own staff. And to be honest, I fully expect Kennedy will join Postecoglou at Spurs this time around, because John Kennedy, Russell, he wants the Celtic job. I'm convinced of it, but he's never going to end up getting the Celtic job by just staying in the back room at Celtic. It's just
Celtic
not going to happen.
Want him to have the Celtic job as well, deep down. That is who they would love it to be. They would all love that.
It doesn't make sense. It's never going to make sense as long as he stays at the back room at Celtic. He could, potentially go somewhere else at Spurs and then perhaps get headhunted for a manager's job. And perhaps if he goes and proves himself over a couple of jobs, and this is very far-fetched in my opinion, but it's the only way he could possibly ever get it, is by actually proving himself elsewhere and then hope Celtic come back calling for him. He's never going to get it just sitting in the background, just watching a different Celtic manager come in every few years. It's never going to work that way for him. So he's as well going down to Spurs and packing his bag.
Wonder what he's been promised. Wonder what he's been promised in the past. I think when we thought it was a canter to 10 in a row, he was definitely going to be in situ after 10. Definitely.
Oh, I think so.
That was the
I
plan.
think it was all
because that all fell apart.
Let him pass over to him.
This is probably as close to an optimum Celtic moment as the board could hope for, and they're realising that, we're hungry for more. We want more success. We want it to now transcend into Europe. Do you know what I mean? So, no, didn't bother with him. Right, Jonathan, before we go, we've got no sudden death tonight, so we're going to play Lenny Fuck Off Bingo. And I don't mean fuck off to Neil Lennon, by the way, just because no one quite says it like Neil Lennon.
We could use him as the first one on the bingo card. I don't think anyone's wanting to come back in
No, I'm not saying it to Lenny. Never. We'll go through the list. You can give me a yay or a nay. If it's a nay, you get the treatment. Right. Okay. Knutson is the guy we've been talking about, Jonathan. If he were to be in talks with Celtic, would you be buzzing, or would you be sitting there looking at Mikey Johnson the way Neil Lennon did?
I think I wouldn't be a problem with Knutson. I think I'd give Knutson a chance. I think out of the left field appointments, he's probably the only one I'm comfortable with.
So he gets a klaxon. He gets a
klaxon. He gets the O'Neill klaxon.
Okay, well, we'll do it the other way. We'll start from the bottom. What about Jesse Marsh? Highly linked with Celtic, two titles in Austria.
No, absolutely not.
That'll be that.
Fuck off. He can fuck off.
John Kennedy, 11-1.
Absolutely not.
This is well better than sudden death. Can we just play this every week? I don't get beat at this. Brendan Rodgers at 10-1, apparently.
Oh no, we take Brendan. But Brendan will never get told to fuck off at the moment.
He's probably
at this moment in time, we're crawling. We're crawling back to Brendan now.
He would take the job because he's not got his own klaxon on the bus. David Moyes, 9-1.
Oh, that's a tough one. Because I quite like Moyes. I just don't know if his time's now passed. I don't know. I think I'd be underwhelmed if it was Moyes.
I don't think he would get the patience. Like if he did the 7 games, 3 wins, 3 defeats, 1 draw.
Fuck off. I'm not a fan of Moyes. I think his time's passed. If he was going to have the Celtic gig now, I think it's gone.
Enzo Maresca.
Oh no, absolutely not. Not for me. Not for me. No,
I love this game. This is the best game ever. Right, okay, this is going to come back and bite us by then, because we'll probably do a show in like 2 weeks. Always been keen on Maresca. If you look at his back catalogue, he's actually done really, really well, and Pep recommends him and stuff. Pep incidentally said today he's got a good relationship with the Celtic owner. I watched the interview, it was bizarre. He got asked about Ange, and then he says, I don't know if he meant to say, I've got a great relationship, or Ange had a great relationship, but he definitely said, I have a great relationship with the Celtic owner.
Maybe it'll be Pep.
Oh, if you're broke, mate, up you come. Win that treble and up you come, son.
I know you're not his biggest fan all the time,
No.
but I'm sure you'll make an exception on this occasion.
Oh, aye, Jonathan. It wouldn't be like me to be an absolute turncoat on my opinions. It would not be dislike me. Last but by no means least, I don't even push the button here, but a name that is quite intriguing and I think would be very much in the realms of the Eddie Howe links. Graham Potter?
Oh, no, I'd take Potter. I would take Potter. If he was offered it, I think I would take Potter. I don't think he'll be interested in it personally. I think he'll probably hold out for another Premiership job because his stock's still reasonably high. But I think, if I would take Graham Potter, I wouldn't be telling him to fuck off. No, I think he'd be a good enough appointment.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That rounds it up for tonight. The Tuesday ticket is done. It's 1 week that I don't need to, cry myself to sleep that I've lost sudden death. But we got to play Lenny F off bingo, which is always a good laugh.
That'll become a full summer thing. We'll find someone to put them in for every week.
Yes, if you are listening on Acast or the other various podcast platforms that our show goes out on, then I apologise you couldn't see the Neil Lennon gif that was going up on the screen on YouTube. It's all just a wee bit of fun. Anyway, it's been brilliant to have you on, Jonathan, as always on a Tuesday. The chat has been very lively. There's over 200 watching live. Remember to like, share, slag my hair, all that carry on. All that's left to say, Jonathan, is in Enzo we trust.